All right, so episode 107 of the 580 show, and I'm joined once again by my friend and 90 kg world champion CJ Pierce. What's up, buddy?
What's up? I'm so glad you had me back on, Josh. This is going to be a lot of fun. Controversial topic that I didn't even realize was controversial.
Right, right. So that's what I was gonna say. So yesterday, and you can elaborate on a little bit, but you posted a question to your story that I thought was interesting. I messaged you kind of early on because I saw people just clapping back at you right away. Uh, and I figured to have you on, let's discuss it. The question that you put up was 24-hour versus 2-hour weigh-in for strongman, and asking people if they would prefer 2-hour weigh-ins, and kind of just took off, right?
Yeah, I mean, so what's funny is it got spurred from another conversation that I had with a friend of mine. He was asking me about my weight cuts and what I thought about weight cuts, and he's not a high level performer yet. I have all the confidence in the world if he's listening that he will be someday, but right now he's not. So I told him just not to cut weight. It's not worth it. And then he asked me what my thoughts were on the safety of the 24-hour weigh-in versus the 2-hour weigh-in. It got my wheels kind of turning. And so then I started talking to some Olympic lifting friends who, of course, are 2-hour weigh-ins, and they have these very strong opinions. So I figured, okay, let's post it. Let's see what people think. I ended up getting about 270 votes, and gosh, at least 100 comments.
Yeah, it seems like from people who are involved in 2-hour weigh-ins, like we have a guy at our gym who's like a big USAPL lifter, like a purist power lifter, and 2-hour weigh-ins strict. Like it's hard for them to wrap their brains around that we do 24-hour weigh-ins. So I think it's super interesting. And it's like it's always kind of how you were talking with your buddy who's just kind of new and not a high level yet. It's always hard to explain to someone not directly involved in strongman or just getting into it that, like, I'm a 175 competitor, but I walk around like 185 or higher. And I'm sure it's the same with you. Like, just I'm talking even just like family, and like you start describing at the Thanksgiving table, like, I'm 195 right now, but in 2 weeks I'm going to be 175. I'm like, well, how do you do that? Like it's
Yeah, it's funny. So I met a guy at the gym this week, and he's a powerlifter, but he's USAPL. So once again, purist, right?
right.
And he was talking to me. He's like, "Yeah, but what weight class do you compete in?" I told him U90. He's like, "Dude, you look way thicker. I mean, this is the nicest way possible than a 198 lifter."
Right.
So of course, I'm like you. I walk around at about 220, and
Mm-hmm.
I cut down to about 198. So I explained to him, the cutting process, and his first response to me was, "That sounds psychotic."
You know how many times I've like been in like my Epsom salt bath like before, or like a sauna when I previously did that method, and I'm like with a couple guys, or I'm like texting my buddies. I'm like, think about how silly this week is that we do leading up to a strongman comp. Like we're dehydrating ourselves to step on a scale and then rehydrate to do manual labor. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah. No, same with me at Clash. I went into I was like 2 pounds over still. I flew in the night before, so I had parent teacher conferences that night. So I flew in on a red eye, got to Florida, 2 pounds overweight. So I went to Jim Mitchell's room, who I'd never met before. He competed at Clash as well, and he let me use his tent sauna. I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, damn, no one else thinks this is sane except for us.
you're right.
No
It's
one.
funny. I've made good friends like in the sport just through water cutting. Like I had to use my scale went out. I had to use Nick Hines' scale at Clash Jersey last year to weigh in. And that's how I met Nick for the first time ever. You know what I mean? Like it's so funny, just the bonding experience that I guess more just strongmen have because we all kind of do these extreme 24
Yeah,
hour
trauma
cuts.
bond, right? Trauma bond.
Yeah, right, right. Well, I I kind of want to just jump right into it. And I think there's a lot of pros and cons. And I think even some of the pros are cons and some of the cons are pros, depending on what side of the argument you're on. As I started to take notes for this episode, I realized like you can kind of argue it either way very clearly. And I think the number one topic to talk about is safety, right? I think that's always the first arguing point. I'm not sure what you saw in your pool, but people always reference this, whether it's for or against 24 hours. People say 2 hours is safer because people won't do cut as much. And then some people say, 24 are safer because you have more time to rehydrate, you know, refuel, recharge, and they say, 2 hours are more dangerous because they're going to do it at these extreme cuts anyway. So it's like, it's both sides of the argument, and I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's really interesting. It stood out to me too. I can definitely see the side that is arguing that the 2 hour weigh-in is not very safe because guys will still cut weight. I was a power lifter too. I competed USAPL before I was a strongman, and I'll never forget the first competition I did. It was a 2 hour weigh-in. There was some guy that came out of the bathroom in trash bags bragging about how he had cut 15 pounds in the past day. He went and weighed in, tried to get rehydrated, and he ended up getting super sick during the competition. Super
Oh,
sick. So I can definitely see that side because you're kind of relying on the common sense of people to say, "Ooh, I can't do more than a 3% weight cut with 2 hours of a
right,
weigh-in."
right.
And is that something that we can really rely on? That common sense.
Being involved in strength sports the last like 10 years, it's like common sense is not one thing I would rely on with our group of people, guys and girls, no offense to our groups, but I feel like people are still going to try those like extreme, like 8 to 10% cuts. But I don't know. I, I don't know how it would end up. Um, but yeah, and I'm sure people still do it for 2 hour powerlifting meets. You still have probably one or two guys and girls that do it, and then same exact story that you said. So I don't
Yeah, they
know.
get
And
super sick, and yeah,
yeah, and I mean, as like I've ran meets myself, and people say, well, you need to monitor your athletes, like the people checking in, make sure no one. And I really do try to do my best. Like I've had someone last summer try to weigh in, and it got to a point where this individual tried to weigh in, couldn't make it, tried to weigh in, couldn't make it. And we're at like 6 or 7 tries on the scale, and to a point where now, like the seventh or eighth time this individual's coming down, they're kind of not all there. Their legs aren't even all the way under them. You're not going to feel great doing a water cut, but you need to be somewhat. And then I was just like, man, you know, this might not be worth it. Talk to the person, and they just ended up going up a class. So I do my best, but what are you going to do it like if there were 2 hour weigh-ins at nationals, and you got like say USS Nationals, they got 1,000 people checking in. You're not going to be able to vet that. It's not a 25 lifter competition. So
no, and I think this argument comes down to, the two models of thinking. There's people who are Darwinists in this world, right? There's people who believe in that natural selection kind of thinking where, oh, okay, you're dumb enough to try to cut, 10% of your body weight for a 2 hour weigh-in, face the consequences and learn. And then you have more of the nurturer side who is more of, okay, let's protect people from themselves and give them a 24-hour weigh-in so they can still do the big cut, but have it be safer. So it's
right.
interesting to see kind of the two models of thinking. It's almost like a political argument.
Yeah.
Are you a Darwinist or are you a nurturer? Which one?
Right. And I didn't realize until you posted it, like how debated of a topic it would be, and how like we'll talk about it a little bit more, but like how strong opinionated people are on wanting to change it to 2 hour weigh-ins. Like,
Yes, yes. And to the 10 or so people who sent me really fired up messages, you may have misread me. I was not arguing for 2 hour weigh-ins. I was just genuinely curious. I respect your opinions. I apologize if you took it some other way.
yeah. I've always, just a little side note too, like I've always in the back of my mind, because you hear these horror stories about boxing or UFC where someone tries to cut too much weight and they get really sick or and hospitalized, or even further like fatality, like level injuries, when it comes to cutting weight and being dehydrated. I've just always been so thankful that I've never heard a story come from that, from strongman and strong woman. Like, but you know, as 24 hours weigh-ins progress, that's something I just think, I'm not certainly don't want 2 hour weigh-ins myself as a competitor. Now that I sit heavier, I can see a time where I did want them at some point when I sat closer to 175. But I do think there needs to be like safety measures in place. But it's hard when you are in a sport like us. It's purely hobby, at
Yeah,
almost
for sure.
99% of the time.
For sure. And I can count on one hand how many really bad things I've seen from weight cuts and strongman. I had a buddy who tried to cut a pretty significant cut to 198, and he ended up hospitalized.
Really?
Yeah, pretty severe, some organ issues.
Wow.
So it goes to show how far are you willing to push your body? I think some people have a higher pain threshold than I do because I've had cuts where midway through I've just gone, you know what? I'm going to be at 231 for this one. I'm not doing this. So I think it just depends on the person, though. Some
Yeah.
guys are willing to push themselves to that point.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. Um, And the next thing I guess that I saw, and you touch on, we'll touch on other stuff that you saw and heard, but I'm just kind of taking notes from an outside perspective. But people say, and they're arguing both sides of this, there'll be a substantial change in numbers because guys who are competing at 80, 90, 105 will be a lot closer to those classes now. So, for example, the average 175 or 80 kilo may only be 180 now. When the competitive guys are 190 to 200 range, all of them. Same with your class, the 90s. I'd say the competitive guys are what, probably 220.
220. Yeah, there's only one competitor. When I think of like world records, for example, from the
Yeah,
U90 class, I have no clue what Rob Ward sits at. Obviously he has the log press record. I have no clue what he sits at. For me, when I broke the axle press world record, I was around 213 pounds.
yeah,
So that's not possible in a 2 hour cut. However, Nikolai Myers for circus dumbbell record was about 206.
yeah,
So that's a little more plausible. So I do see though the general trend though of the world records, they would definitely go down. That's
yeah.
for sure. You know,
And then I saw actually someone um, take the opposition to that and say that numbers would increase because less weight cuts will actually relate to better performances. So yeah, like you might not have as many people. You may have people from the 90s now in the 105s, but those people are going to be fully fed. Like a fully fed CJ Pierce with no water cut may come into the 231s and hit a 440 axle now. You know what I mean? So that was one side I saw someone take.
yeah, and I do think there's some merit to that because I'll tell you, this year, especially when I did that major cut for Clash, I feel like I performed better at the record breaker competition I did at 213 pounds as a presser than I did weighing 220 for Clash and
Yeah.
cutting down. So I do think there is some merit to a lesser cut being beneficial for performance.
Yeah. I do think though, if I had to take a side on this argument, I do think that records would definitely go down and numbers would take a hit just because you don't have 200 guys competing as 80 kilo guys, and you don't
No.
have like you basically like it's crazy to think about it, but we have 90s that compete as 80s, hundreds that compete as 90s, and 120s compete as 105s. 115s compete as 105s. I'm speaking in kilos, obviously, but you know what I mean? Like it's crazy because if I couldn't cut, I'm a 200 guy instantly
Oh
without
yeah, I'm a
dieting,
220. Yeah,
and you're
I'm a
220.
220 right away.
Yeah. And like, for example, the producer of this podcast, Dante, right? He competes at 231 and he walks around 250s, 260. So,
Jeez.
you know,
Whew. Yeah,
you know,
that's a big water cut.
and
Yeah.
it's like I remember the first time I met Nick Camby, and I mean he's going to heavyweight now, allegedly. But I remember the first time I met him was in Jersey Clash last year, just passing by. I'm like, this dude's huge.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he's
Like,
like I'm not small, but he was like two of me's stacked next to each other and then some.
yeah, yeah. And it's like, so I do think if I had to take a side on that, I would say records and overall numbers would be decreased in strongman.
And I'm really curious. Just because we have some of these international studs now, you have Emmanuel as a 105 who just broke the log record, and I've read that he sits closer to like 240 than he does like 250. So I was just thinking, I was like, man, that's really impressive that this guy sits so close to his weight class in comparison to the other dudes,
Yeah,
and he's out there breaking world records at the log press.
right.
You know,
I would be I would be curious where Ben Donan sits because he's just taken over our class obviously this last year. And he's made weight for like 4 shows in the last less than 6 months. So he's making weight. He made weight for Clash, which he won.
Yeah.
He made weight for OSG, which he won. He set the under 80 kilo deadlift record, so assuming that he weighed in. Um, and he just set the circus dumbbell record for 80 kilos. So that's just off the top of my head, I'm counting 4 times he's weighed in the last, you know,
Yeah.
5 months.
Which is insane. I would gander, Josh. Of course, I'm speculating.
Right,
When I
right.
look at him, I think he's around 187 or 188. I think he sits a little lower than the other guys.
That's
I would
that's
I would gander.
impressive. If
Yeah,
true, that's impressive. I mean, he just
yeah.
hit a 105 circus weighed in. That's crazy.
His body type reminds me a lot of Nick Gannon
Who's
because
that?
Nick Gannon just super super stacked,
Okay.
a little leaner, kind of more narrow shoulders, but just jacked all over.
Yeah.
And Ben reminds me a lot of that mold.
Yeah. I've never met Ben Donnan in person, but obviously he has just completely this last year redefined our class. The world record deadlift for our class, I think, going into this year was like 715,
Oh
and
yeah.
he just pulled 795. And it's like, man. And he just pressed a 105. I saw, and I don't know if this is true, but I saw it in a post on Instagram. But I saw his circus broke every weight class's circus in France.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. I mean, a 231 circus dumbbell is absurd. Like that's a great circus. I
Right.
don't know if I'm pressing 231 right now.
Right.
So like that's a great circus dumbbell press.
Yeah. He's a stud. But yeah, I mean, but like, then he obviously, like, to go back to what we're talking about, he goes to 90 next. So you know what I mean? Like, what is the deadlift record for your class? Do you know it off the top of your head?
Oh, Gavin McNamee just broke it. I want to say it's mid 8.
Mid 8. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
which is a pretty nice jump. I feel like that's from U80 to U90. That's a
I
proportional jump.
I think so too. What's the 105? Do we know?
Oh gosh,
I mean,
is it still Luke Davies? Does he still have it at 9 something?
I don't know. I don't. I would said I was gonna be shocked if it's not in the nines, right?
Yeah, I'm almost positive it's in the nines. I think suited is a 900-pound pull.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Jump wise, like high sevens, mid 8s, 9 for 105s. That
Yeah,
makes.
yeah, it makes sense. But back to the topic, like you said, I think those numbers would go down.
I
Um, yeah, although I think in our weight class, I think if Ben Donen jumped to a U90, weighed about 201, 202, and did a 2 hour water cut, I think he still breaks a lot of world records.
I think so too. I think so too. That's the other side of the argument. I and I agree with that. Um, it it's funny because from my point of view, like trying to do a cut, and I'm sure you can do this. You can think about it the same way, and then thinking about competing 2 hours later is miserable.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
two
yeah.
hours
Yeah.
later, like you're just getting your IV, you're getting done with your IV, and you're sitting there, and you're gonna just eat and sleep and go for little walks for the rest of the next 20 hours. And thinking about competing on a 2 hour weigh-in with cutting weight at all would be absolutely miserable to me. I would not
Yeah.
try
Oh,
to cut.
I wholeheartedly agree. Like 110%. Um, I think once again though that's the argument against the 2 hour weigh-in. And the
Right.
other really good argument that I saw that I agree with, especially at local shows, you're asking for a 2 hour weigh-in on what's already a show going till 7 p.m.
That was
You
my
know,
next bullet point. That
yeah.
was,
So
that was
I read that
literally,
I was like, how do you argue against that? You know?
yeah. And well, you know what though? I've seen is people don't offer promoters don't offer day before weigh-ins because and it almost seems, and I don't want to say that they are lazy, but it almost seems like it may be lazy behavior because they don't want to be there at the gym or facility the whole day prior. And I mean, I know for me, if we're talking logistically, I love having athletes weigh in the day before. If you've
Yeah.
ever, anyone who's listening to this that's ever ran a competition or been involved in running a competition, if your competition starts at 10 a.m., right, which most of them do, right, that 8 to 9 hour is one of the most hectic parts of your day because you have the last like 15 to 20 people that either didn't weigh in or don't have to weigh in because they're super heavies or whatever. And just having a fifth of the competition weighing in that hour, I can't imagine doing it the day of with if you have an 80-person comp, checking in all 80 people in that 2 hour. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and the competitions I've ran into the same issue where I've asked, hey guys, please make sure you weigh in the day before. Please make sure you weigh in the day before. And then of course they got 15 guys who roll in. It's 9 o'clock. You have the rules being in 20 minutes. So like, hey, where can I weigh in? You're just like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. So I'm definitely for it as a promoter 24 because it just allows you to, in my opinion, run a better contest. Um, yeah, yeah. I just think also it's like if me and you are weighing in, right? You're gonna want to weigh in right at 8. I'm gonna want to weigh in right at 8 because we're both freaking hungry
Oh yeah.
and like we both want to drink our water and get ready for the comp. So it's like you're gonna have 90% of the competitors wanting to weigh in at the exact same time. People are gonna be getting there. Like you said, it's already a long day. Say the show's gonna go 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. You're gonna have people showing up at literally 6:30 in the morning to try to be the first person in line.
Oh yeah. That would be me. 100%. I would be there
Yeah.
at 6:30 waiting and
Me too. I would literally do that. I mean, I've weighed in. I've had shows. I've done like 3 or 4 contests that were not 24, but they weren't two either. They were like 12-hour weigh-ins, like the night before, and those still suck because you don't have as much time. But they're obviously a lot better than 2 hours. But
Josh, what's funny, I think you're reading my mind because I was going to bring up the idea of a 12-hour weigh because I had a guy message me and said, why does it have to be 2 hours? Why can't it be like 12 hours?
yeah,
And I was like, oh, okay, that's another good point. I should add an option to my poll.
yeah,
What do you think about 12-hour weigh-ins?
yeah. It just shows us meatheads. We're like, no, it has to either be the most extreme here or the most extreme here. We can't just like find 12 hours and meet right here.
There can be no in between. It's got to be
Yeah.
one or the other.
It's a good idea. And okay, so this has actually said something to me by someone that and it made so much sense to me. And the standard, this person's opinion was the standard should be whatever the standard is. If okay, let me try to word this a little bit better. If it's a nationals level show or it's a world class level show, the standards for weighing in should be the same as that next show that it takes you to if you qualify. So therefore, say you're doing my show, CJ, and my show qualifies you for nationals, so Strongman Corporation nationals, and Strongman Corporation and USS alike, they both use 24-hour weigh-ins. But my show is 2-hour weigh-ins. I disagree with that. And like I think you should have to mirror what your I guess father competition would be. I don't know how to really, your qualifying competition because you're qualifying as a 90 and you're competing to try to qualify as a 90. So it should be the same standards and you're going under the same federation. You
Yeah,
know?
I think definitely if there were any changes whatsoever, say that we switch to this 12-hour weigh-in idea or the 2-hour weigh-in idea, every competition that leads to that big competition then has to mirror.
I
You
agree.
can't have your qualifier be a 12-hour and then the big show be a 24.
Yeah.
Because who's to say the results from that 12-hour wouldn't be different with a 24-hour?
100%. Well, like just this year, just this past year, the qualifier I did for Strongman Corporation Nationals was only a 12-hour weigh-in. And then I go to, and that sucked. It sucked because I'm going to nationals to try to be as competitive as possible. I know it's going to be a 24. I get though, I do understand people, promoters, volunteers, we all have jobs. Like we're not paying the bills on running strongman comps. And so some people work every Friday and it's hard for people to even get off on the weekends. So I do understand, hey, it's only 12-hour weigh-ins, but that's all I could offer, and that's, we don't live in a perfect world and our sport doesn't have a lot of money in it. So I do understand why it does happen with some people though.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
But I kind of like the 12-hour weigh-in idea almost now. It's
Yeah, see now, and what's funny, I wanted to bring up just another quick point from
yeah,
when I was reading the comments. You'd be surprised how many top 10 OSG competitors messaged me very against 24-hour weigh-ins.
really, really.
I was shocked. I would say it's right around 60% of
Wow.
really high-level
And so
competitors.
you were talking about World's Strongest Man. For people that don't know, OSG, you guys probably hear us reference it on the show. That is World's Strongest Man for weight class athletes. So
Yeah, I mean, I had left and right OSG competitors telling me I wish they would do day of weigh-ins, or just because they were so done with cutting. Like, I mean, like maybe it's because we're still, we're only a month removed from OSG, so you still have, those bad memories of cutting weight. But I had one of my friends who also, competed at OSG sent me a message and was like, dude, I am just so done with cutting. I wish that we could do away with this idea of 24-hour weigh-ins because I just want to compete where I sit.
yeah, you know, it was I'm gonna give credit to both of them because I don't know which one said it, but my friends Cody Abel and Andrew Hanus were on the pod. You're friends with them both as well. You know them, great guys. And one of them made a great point, and they said they were a firm believer that we only have so many 8% plus water cuts in our lives. Because you are legitimately dehydrating yourself and stressing out your organs a lot. And I thought that was really interesting to hear because they're both top level guys. Um, I was, I thought that was very interesting for them to say, and I think it's true.
Yeah, I mean, because this isn't a science that has a ton of history. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we probably have what, probably 15 years of data maybe on weight cuts and extreme weight cuts from high level athletes. I'm sure boxers back in the day did weight cuts. I'm sure wrestlers did huge weight cuts back in the day too. But at the same time, we don't have modern data from these 10% body fat, body weight cuts. We have none. So the question is, in 30 years, what will today's athletes that are cutting, let's say, more than 8% 6 times a year, what is their outcome going to be?
Yeah, 100%. And what you just said really kind of sparked something in my brain. I see it as a gym owner, I see it as a coach, as a friend, just someone that's involved in strongman. You don't realize, and this is no offense, but you don't realize how dumb some people cut. I should just say how unsafe or uninformed and everything. People cut so wrong for contests. And
Terribly,
it,
terribly.
I've seen people weigh in for our shows, and I've been at shows. And I'm talking very recently, and there's a lot of people out there that can help you with this stuff that have done it. And it really isn't that. I mean, I think it's more mentally draining, almost ironically, than it is physically. Um, and I've seen people weigh in for shows who have just did upwards almost 10% cut.
Yeah.
And they don't even have a water bottle with them. They don't have a Pedialyte. They don't even know where they're going, what they're going to consume. They just got on the scale, and it's mind blowing to me. And I'm also referring to the stuff that people do to get down, just starving themselves, like going for 5K runs in trash bags, like the day before they're going to compete. And every time I hear one of these new stories, it's crazy. It's crazy to me. So
Yeah, so I'm not perfect. I don't want to sound,
sure.
like I said, I even said this to one of the guys who sent me a fired up message. Like, this is not a holier than thou post because I have done so many dumb things, including those sweat sticks, which are horrible for you. I
Mhm.
took two of those sweat sticks, started at like 212, weighed in at 195 the next day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so I'm definitely not someone who has always done this intelligently. Now I have a coach for it. But you're
Right.
right. There's tons of guys who do this in very unsafe ways
Yeah.
that I think causes more damage than what we know.
Yeah. It's really disheartening. And I always recently, as I've learned more about water cutting, and I've really consulted with who I think are some of the best people and most knowledgeable people in it. I try to pay it forward and try to help people out with it and offer up at least my thoughts on it. It just takes me back to like my old wrestling days when I wrestled in high school. Back in probably when I was a sophomore and I started wrestling, so we're talking like 2010, 2009, 2010. Our wrestling coach was really old school, and I wrestled 112, but I walked around heavier than that. Not much heavier, but he would show up to school, my old wrestling coach, with a ball of athletic tape, a roll of athletic tape. He'd roll it inside out. He'd write me a note for my teachers. He'd give me an empty 5 gallon or a gallon jug, empty gallon jug, inside out athletic tape to chew on, and I would spit in a gallon jug every day, all day, any day I had a match. and I had a school handwritten note and like, dude, I'm like, 16. You're going through times where you want girls to like you and stuff like that in school, and I'm walking around with a gallon jug of my own freaking loogies in it and a ball of tape in my mouth, and I'm sure that probably wasn't the best way for me to cut weight. So it takes me back to those days when I hear some of these stories.
So, Josh, yeah, you must be reading my mind. I was about to bring up this point next. One of my friends, one of my best friends, he comments on the post. He actually coaches wrestling, and so he commented, what kind of message are you sending to younger athletes when you post these crazy weight cuts?"
It's true. It's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%, one hundred
So,
percent.
so I coach wrestling, strength and conditioning. I actually have a handful of wrestlers that I coach at our gym. And so Pennsylvania is the number one wrestling state. So we're really competitive here. And one thing that I really like to see recently, I don't know what year they did it, but it's recently here. They put serious restrictions, and you'll have to ask your buddy because I'm curious, but they've put serious restrictions on water cutting for the kids.
See,
Um,
that's good. That's
yeah,
good.
it's very good because, dude, I mean, it's hard to trust a 14 to 18-year-old kid to water cut.
Yeah, yeah.
And
That
and
frontal lobe is not developed. It's not
yeah,
ready.
and nor would you really want them to. But
No.
like, I mean, for example, I got a kid that wanted to wrestle 179, and they do hydration tests now. They do body weight tests very regularly to make sure how much you're allowed to cut. And they actually, after Christmas, you get 2 pounds added to your allowance because, like, the holidays, everything like that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's really cool. But like, I had a kid that's a 179, weighed in at like 180.8 or something, and he actually wasn't allowed to cut to 179. They bumped him up to 189. And we're talking like a pound and a half.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really like that on the kid side, on the kid side. I do understand what your buddy's saying though. Like, you know,
Yeah, you got
people
you know, and well, it made me reflect because I get all sorts of followers. I get trolls. I get kids who are curious about strongman. And I had a 17-year-old doing his first powerlifting meet ask me how he could lose 20 pounds in 3 days.
you're like, dude, you don't.
I'm like, dude,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you don't do that. And so I went on this long tangent with him about like how he's growing, what reasons there are to ever cut weight, how he's a young athlete. He's squatting 315, he's deadlifting 405, he's benching 225. There is no reason for him to cut any weight.
Right.
So I go on this long thing with him, and I tell him, I was like, have you asked your coach about cutting? He tells me no. I'm like, okay, so that's the first guy you ask. So then he messaged me back. He's like, okay, my coach said the same thing you did. I was like, yep, you should not cut.
Right.
You know, like even with my adult athletes, some of these guys that I coach, they'll ask me, should I cut 15 pounds? I tell them no. Like, why? Why would you cut 15 pounds? What's the purpose?
Right. It, it makes me think about it too. And psychologically, like, just in strength sports now, there's a lot of records. And if you're listening, I'm putting up the quotations. And I'm not talking like CJ Pierce records. I'm not talking Ben Donen records. I'm talking powerlifting has 100 federations now. Um, Strongman has all these state records now, and that's cool to have something to strive for. But you do have to think, and I try to tell people, you're going for a subcategory record in a state, in a federation that has never even contested those, and you're cutting 25 pounds to break this record when you could deadlift 50 pounds more if you just wouldn't ruin it by trying to cut for it and everything like that. It's a lot. It's a
It's
lot to
it's a
try to
lot.
convince people to that you never want to shit on someone and say the record doesn't matter, because who am I to tell someone that their goal for a strength sport doesn't matter? But you know what I mean? It's
Yeah, and I'm gonna kind of go back to what Andrew and Cody were talking about. You only have so many of these 8% body weight cuts that you can do within your career. Do you want to waste one early on trying to go after a state record, or do you want to hold on to later when you're more competitive, maybe going for national records? You
yep,
know,
yep.
so
I remember the last powerlifting meet I did. I was in college, Right. I just graduated college and I didn't know what I was doing. I was one of the people we were just talking about. And I cut from nothing crazy. And it was 24-hour weigh-ins. I cut from like 207 to 198. And I weighed in after just starving myself, not doing it right. And I go to the local pizza place on campus and I get two big pizza burgers, stuff my face, and I don't refeed properly, whatever. And I just remember how bad it messed up my stomach. And I probably left 100 pounds off my total that meet. Like legitimately,
Oh,
like almost 100 pounds off my total. And it was still my best total this date, but I expected a lot more. And I had 24 hours and my stomach never fully recovered. I was so sick. And I remember the light bulb going off in my head. I'm like 21, 22, and I'm like, I'm doing something wrong.
yeah.
Um, and that was the last time I ever did that without help from someone else and doing a lot of research. And it's just crazy how much you can ruin stuff by doing these weight cuts, you know?
Yeah, and for any young athletes listening to us, unless there is a reason you're coming, a legitimate reason, like you believe you can win nationals that year, you believe you could contend for a national record. There's no reason for you to cut weight whatsoever.
Yep.
None.
It's
None.
a tough pill to swallow. It really is.
Yeah.
And yeah,
My first three strongman shows I did, I didn't cut any weight. I was weighing 187. I competed 198.
yeah,
I refused to cut weight, which I think was actually really good.
it
Um,
is.
but yeah, you gotta be smart. You gotta save those cuts for when it matters.
Yeah, and one trend I see people do that are more top level guys, they'll compete at nationals, um, OSG, the Arnold, the big shows, Clash at their lower weight class, like the class that they are competitive in, and then local shows, like for you, maybe like Arizona Strongest Man or something like that. Maybe compete at 220, so you save that cut. It's more of a local show. You know what I mean? I
Yeah,
see
and
that
that was
strategy
actually
a lot of people.
one of the comments, Josh, that I got was if you cut late for a local show, you're a weenie. And just
Yeah,
made me laugh. It made me
yeah,
laugh.
yeah.
I was like, man, if that's not true though, you know,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
so I did it's nice because so this off season, these last like 2 months, I've worked with a nutritionist and I've put on a lot of weight, like 10 pounds. But before I would walk around like 180.
yeah,
So a very easy cut to 175 for Strongman Corp. And then there's a local show that I do every year that's USS that I would do 181 because I wouldn't have to cut. I'd weigh in jeans, just my normal thing. So yeah, USS. That extra 6 pounds helps me out a lot. But if I do another USS show, I'm gonna do 200s from now on. So
for sure. Yeah, I'm playing.
yeah.
I'm gonna do USS Nats at 220.
Oh, are you this year?
Yeah, yeah, I am. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's like a
I'm do
$60 plane ticket. So
yeah, I'm doing it at 181. So I'll see you there.
yes.
I want to do both nationals in the same year, and yeah.
See
So
that'd be fun. That's a good goal. I like
yeah.
that.
So yeah, I mean, what else were you hearing, seeing? I mean, people get, you know you can't get too mad at people getting worked up because people are passionate about strongman, right? Like we're all passionate about it. I mean, we're filming a podcast on a Friday before New Year's, like right now. We like it too, but like what were people saying to you, and what were some other like good comments that you thought you heard?
Yeah, so obviously besides the safety, from both sides, the 12-hour weigh-in I thought was a great suggestion. Um, another comment that I got was, and this was something that didn't occur to me until I did more research. Weightlifting has changed their weight classes so many times. Why would changing the weight classes for strongman to kind of compensate for the lesser window of a weight cut? Why would that be an issue? And so then, of course, I start researching the weight changes through Olympic lifting history time. And there's
Mhm.
been like 40. I didn't even realize
Really?
has been so many weightlifting weight classes changes, and so that I thought was a really good comment because it just kind of counteracted everyone who said, well, you can't change records. Because this guy was like, well, USA Olympic lifting has changed records so many times.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Me neither. And until I did research, until this guy pointed out to me, I was like, oh, okay, I guess they do this.
Yeah, yeah. I will say, like, it would be disheartening if you were even smaller guy trying to do strongman because I forget. I've been out of powerlifting for a while, but I forget what like they had some pretty light classes. Like even for guys, like you could get down as low as like 132, even maybe lighter than that if you were
Yeah,
a guy.
132, 148,
I
165, right? Like it was
remember,
real light.
yeah, but like if you do think about it, say you're, 150 pound guy, right? And you really love strongman and you want to compete and your goal is to compete at nationals and OSG and whatever. Your closest weight class is 175. And most of us 175ers are 200 or close to damn near close to 200. So that is literally a 50-pound swing in body weight. And I get some of you guys say, suck it up, eat more. But the truth of the fact, some people are 5'2", five foot
Yeah,
one, and they don't want to feel like crap. They want to be 150 where their body naturally sits. And I get, I just think about that sometimes. I'm like, that would be kind of disheartening. Like,
yeah. No,
you
I
know,
agree. And I hope eventually there is a market, especially for OSG, where lighter guys who are like 150 maybe get a weight class.
yeah, I
Right now I
agree.
just don't feel there's a market for it,
There's
but I'm
not.
hoping in a couple years. Maybe in a couple years there might be.
I, it's funny because I've had a couple people that are outspoken to me as a state chair, and they come to me, "Hey, can you tell Dion to bring back the 150s for Strongman Corp?" And I go back, I'm like, "Look, I can mention something to her, I can text her, whatever you guys want. I'm just doing my fulfilling my duties in my volunteer seat." But if you go back and historically look at it, I think the most there's ever been for a 150 subclass at nationals was two, maybe
Yep, it
three.
was the year I did it. Yep, it was the year I did
Was
SC
that in
Next.
Virginia?
Yeah, it was. Yep, it was in
Yep.
Virginia.
Yeah, I was there, and there was two guys.
Two
And
guys in the 150s. Yep.
so you do have to remember, it's a business. It has to make sense. We're not just gonna add a 106 guys class and there not be anyone in it. You know what I mean? So like, uh,
Yeah,
it
yeah, and
sucks.
I get with the water cuts too. I get the comments of it really sucks when you actually weigh 198 to compete against guys who are 220.
Yeah.
I completely get because I have competed, as a as weighing about 215 against guys who weigh 250,
Right. Right.
and I get it, but it's also you gotta I guess just figure out a way to make up points where you can.
Well,
You
yeah. I
know,
mean that's a good point. And I mean, it would be one thing if we weren't all playing under the same rules, but we're all playing under the same rules. And for some
yeah,
people, it sucks. But I think as the sport continues to grow and we get more involvement, and hopefully, we keep bringing people in. It can be a toxic group in strongman, unfortunately, and people for some reason want to keep people out. I want to keep bringing people in. I know you do too, and I know 90. I'm speaking about a less than 1%.
yeah.
But I know 99% of people want to keep the sport growing. Like you said, maybe there will be a market for a 150 at OSG and Strongman Corp to bring back, and USS has a 165. I mean,
USS
that's
does. I found that class actually to be growing. The
yeah, yeah,
165.
that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, but as the sport continues to grow, I think maybe there will be a weight class shakeup when stuff makes more sense. Maybe there will be more classes added as stuff makes sense. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone knows the story about why there's a 105 class, but
Yeah,
I
I
know
just
Willie
I actually
Wessels told me the story.
yeah, I just heard that story. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, so if anyone's curious about why there's a 105 and it's on a 100 kilo class, ask Willie Wessels because it's a pretty funny story.
Yeah, I just was he on a podcast or he was talking to someone about it.
I don't know. It was hilarious though. I'm a huge Willie's a friend of mine. I think he's hilarious. But he
Yeah.
told me the story. I was like, man, that's so funny. That's the way it turned out. And then people just stuck to it.
Yeah. Yeah, like we're like speaking about it like it can't change, and the way it was created was just hilarious, like with no
Yeah.
no sense in mind.
So I guess, and this is off our topic of water cuts. So I apologize. I've always wondered how can we make a lightweight pro class in something like Strongman Core USS? How can we do that? Because I think there are so many high level 181 guys nowadays. How do we make that a pro class? Because I love that there's a U105 Pro. I think that's great. U105 Pro, that's a great place to have a weight class. What if, Strongman Core made a U85 for as a pro class and kind of push that class a little more because there are some great competitors at that lighter weight class, especially in Strongman Core, USS. How can you make it so those guys are a little more marketed?
Yeah. I I agree with you, and I have a couple arguments about that, but that just made something pop into my head. I was on Instagram yesterday. I got a follower from a Canadian strongman that I've never talked to him, but he followed me, and I clicked on his profile, and he won nationals for Strongman Corp Canada this year, and
Yeah,
he was a pro strongman, and I'm like, I won nationals in the U.S. this year, and I'm not a pro strongman. It's
yeah.
like,
I'm like I've won SC Nats twice. Like what, but
yeah.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
So it's
You know,
like
yeah.
I get it. So, but the only argument I have, obviously, I wish there was pros for our classes. Like, I think that'd be a cool goal to achieve, and I think it needs to be done right. The only thing that I would not like is I can see myself say I go back to nationals and it's top three, get their pro card, whatever, and I get my pro card this year. What do I do after that? Like, there has to be enough. This has to be thoroughly thought out. Like, when I first started campaigning for a pro card, which I do, let me just say, I do believe there should be for 80s, 90s. If there's a 105, I think 80s, 90s, 105s, all 10 classes in Strongman Corp, I think should have a pro card instead of four or five, however many there are. But there has to be a foundation laid out. So it's like, okay, CJ Pierce has got his pro card. What opportunities are available to him as a professional strongman now?
See, and I almost wonder if you have to create an automatic qualifying system. Like, okay, you're a pro, you can come to nationals whenever you want. You're a
Yeah,
pro, you qualify for the Arnold whenever you want. You wonder. I mean, there's got to be simple ways to do it where it makes sense for the athletes to want to become a pro. Because
yeah,
right, we've kind of found that without the U105s too. What does it lead to besides America's Strongest Man?
right.
What do they get to do besides America's Strongest Man?
Well, what would I do if this year Dion just decided that the podium at nationals got a pro card? What would I do now? I would
Yeah,
just go to OSG every single year.
yeah. I'm not one of those guys either because there are some detractors who say like being a pro means nothing. It means something. Like
No,
get out there. It means
yeah, I
something.
100%. I think and I get that there's holes in the system. There's holes in any system.
Oh, for sure.
Evan Singleton isn't a pro strongman.
Yeah, no, he's not a pro strongman.
But
He's yeah,
but you can tell him he's a pro. You can tell he's a pro strongman, right? He makes more money than most people do off strongman. But like, I would just want there to be a foundation because if I have now achieved a goal and become a pro strongman, my options should be, I don't want to say greater, but at least I should have options. It shouldn't be, hey, one weekend out of every single year, your schedule has to be clear because you have to go to Daytona Beach, Florida, or wherever OSG is this year, and that's all you can do. Like, I love strongman. We were talking about before the pod. Like, I love competing. I want to compete as long as I possibly can. That's my goal, is to compete in strongman as long as I possibly can. And I don't want to have one show a year, Like, I want to be able to, if I get a bug up my ass, I want to go do a show. Like, that's
yeah,
how I am.
yeah. See, like, because I'm doing a show in Phoenix next month, which is a local show. I want to do it because it looks like it has fun events.
Right.
I want to be able to continue to do that.
Right. I do Ohio Strongest Man every single year. This will be my third straight year because it's
Yeah,
fun. It's 40 minutes from my house. I love the dudes that run it. It's for a good cause every year. I can't do that anymore. Like, I look at it selfishly, like,
yeah, yeah. So you're right. There's holes. I almost wonder if we need a separate podcast episode talking about the holes
I
and
agree.
how we can make a
I agree.
qualifying system for
We got
pros.
off topic there, but I do say I want to touch on it because you made an awesome point. I hate people. It is one of my biggest pet peeves when people say a pro card in strongman doesn't mean anything because I think there are a lot of people who have given up a lot time, effort, put it their blood, sweat, and tears into their sole goal of becoming a pro strongman or woman, and I think that they should be applauded, and it does mean a lot.
I mean, how dare you take any accomplishment away from someone?
And
You know what I
I
mean? Like like it's it doesn't impact you whatsoever.
right,
And
I think
the effort that went into becoming a pro is insane. So I don't like the detracting statements either. I'm with you.
I think I think maybe the system has failed our pros. Maybe we. It's hard though because at the end of the day, federations are businesses. They have to make money, and
Yeah,
I'm sure that they look at it, hey, what if we did an 380 kg pro shows a year and 390, okay, and then they're starting to add up the money. Well, we just paid out $500,000. Where's that money coming from? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it has to make sense both ways. You can't just expect free money. So I get it on both ends, but I really hate when people try to take away from people's accomplishments.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like I said, I love what Willie did. Willie made a pro USS heavyweight class. I love that. And not only
Yeah.
that, when they compete at their pro show, they got cash prizes. You
You
know,
know, I, I
it's
got I got to share something on a personal note, and then we'll go back and we'll talk a little bit more about the 2 hour versus 24. But I hope this individual doesn't mind me naming them. But maybe I won't. I don't know if I should name him. Maybe I will. Okay,
it's up to you, Johnny.
I'll speak about it for myself. After Strongman Corporation Nationals this year, a certain 105 got their pro card. And I saw them posting that they were having like imposter syndrome because certain 105s weren't there. It's Bill Kendall. He became a friend of mine through it.
Oh, Bill's great.
Yeah,
He sent me a message. Yeah, yeah.
great dude. And I saw him post a story, having a little bit of imposter syndrome because he won his pro card and not every 105. Dude, I was going through that psychologically too this year because not every top guy was at nationals. But then I told myself, you can only compete against who's there. And I I think like people tend to do that and hold themselves up to a higher pedestal, but like stuff like that, you should be so proud of that accomplishment in strongman. And then I talked myself into it and I became proud of my accomplishment. But Bill said that, and it's like, wow, we really take this so serious. And people reach their final goal and then they're held to this thing where they're doubting themselves and they're second guessing their accomplishments when this dude should be popping champagne bottles. He should be excited. He should be celebrated. He should be in his local newspaper. Like if I had it my way, that's how he would be celebrated. So like, I hope that everyone that's listening and everyone that's accomplished something, I mean, hey, it's 2023. Let's look back at 2022 real quick. If you accomplished something in 2022 in strongman or a personal goal, you should be proud of it because,
Yes.
you set that goal and you should be proud of it. Like that's one thing I'm really working on 23. I want to be as positive as possible. I want to be as good of an influence on the sport. I don't know why your thing made me think back to that Bill Kendall comment, but like it's not. I remember I sent him a DM and I'm like, dude, you should be so proud of this. And I really hope he is. And I hope everyone is. You can only compete against who you want. Dude, listen, if this year the Kansas City Chiefs play against the 49ers in the Super Bowl and Pat Mahomes gets hurt and can't play in the Super Bowl, the 49ers win. They're still going to celebrate that Super Bowl, dude.
Yes.
You showed up, you cut weight, you paid for your travel, you made all these sacrifices, you take off work and you competed. You can only compete against who shows up, and that's that. You know what I mean? So,
I mean, I've talked to Bill about this a little bit too because he asked me if I ever had imposter syndrome, which I have. I'll be very open. I've had imposter syndrome a ton. And I relayed the same message. He should be extremely proud. I hope Bill listens because he should be very proud of his accomplishment. It's not easy to become a pro U105. It's very difficult. Anyone who says otherwise is full of it. No offense, but like
right.
you are insane if you don't think it's hard to become a pro. I had it after I won SC in when I won COVID year 2020, 2021, and even Clash, because I had people who messaged me saying, well, what do you think if so-and-so was there? Do you think you still would have won? And my message was always the same. I only compete against who's at the competition.
Right. That's what you can do.
Yeah. That's all you can do. That's all you can do.
I tell people all the time that, well, I'm competing against this guy, this girl at this show. It's like, what do you want to do? Besides illegally breaking their kneecaps or hurting them, you can only control yourself still. Like I get we compete against people, but if you and I go head to head, all I can do is my best and focus on my best. You're going to do your best at that show. You know what I mean? So that's one thing I just hope everyone in 2023 is proud of it. I shot Bill a DM and said we talked about him on the pod. I'll get his approval before it goes up, but I'm sure.
Okay, perfect, good. Yeah, yeah.
I met him at nationals this year, and he approached me by saying he listened to the pod on the way here. So he seems to be a somewhat listener. So I really appreciate him, and I'm glad I
Well,
made a friend out of
Bill
him.
is a great dude. I love messaging him. He's a crazy stone lifter. He is
Yeah,
an insane stone lifter. He's got big things coming for him.
yeah, yeah. That's
You know,
awesome.
and Josh, I'm just going to share the way that I kind of cope with the mental aspect of competition, just because it's been really beneficial for my own mindset. I have started before competitions, before prep starts. I set my own goals for the competition, and I make a vow to not look at who I'm competing against,
That's
because
good.
that's where that toxicity comes in. That's where that negative self-talk comes in. That's when you start doing things that when it's all said and done, whether you get first, second, third, last, you're not going to be proud of when you're all done.
Right,
I would never be proud if I went through someone's profile who I was competing against and just in my head started thinking, oh, how do I be him? How do I be him? How do I be him? Because, like you said, besides taking a bat to their knees, you can't control what they're going to do. You
right.
know,
Yeah, it's psychologically draining.
it
And
is.
remember, people only not I don't want to say 100% of the time, but people tend to only post their good stuff on Instagram. Like when you're yeah, like when you're I post like my max deadlift. Like I don't post like my shit day where I worked 14 hours and I barely got through my rep work. So when you're going through those competitors' email like profiles, because you guys are still going to do it, like just remember that's their best. Like that's their best. And but it's probably better to just take your route and just not even do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like I have tons of friends, who I compete against the 90 class. And I always root for them to do their best because if they do their best, I'm gonna have to do my best.
Right.
And that's where that positive mindset of competition comes in. If you compete against everyone at their best, that's going to force you to bring your best out too. You might not win, but on that day you were at your very best, and that's something that you should be proud of.
Right. And like you try to make it like an enemy out of people in your class. Like I've showed up to every comp I've ever showed up to. I end up being friends with everyone in my class, or at least very friendly with them. You know what I mean? Maybe there's that one guy at your shows that's not going to be around in strongman forever. He's got his headphones on and he's just a very not nice person, but 99.9% of everyone in strongman is super nice. So it's like you're making a fake enemy out of someone that you're going to end up being friends with. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I just there's no point to it. There's no point to it.
Right.
There's. I wish I would have learned it earlier. That's for
Right.
sure.
Well, what else? We got so far off topic, but
Oh yeah, we.
I think it's a really really good conversation though. But what else? Did anything else before we wrap it up? Did anything else stick out to you about the 24-hour versus 2 hour weigh in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go ahead and release the results now because
Okay,
I've held it. So we had about 260 votes. It ended up being 51% are for 2 hour weigh-ins, 49% are against.
that's
Um,
that's shocking to me. First off, that really is shocking to me.
it was it. Yeah. I mean, for me too. And I guess from my mindset, now that we've talked, Josh, I am completely in the middle. And someone had sent me a message saying, "Why don't you have an in the middle option?" I was like, oh, okay. Once again, fair feedback. I appreciate that. That's very fair.
Right,
I'm completely in the middle now because I heard so many good arguments from both sides
right.
from people I respect. It's I I don't know if I vote yes or no now. I really don't know.
Yeah, I want to say too, like I'm not campaigning for it to get changed, and there's no like legislation out in either of the federations to change it. This was just like you explained why it came up, and I just thought it was a good topic. That's one thing I'm going to do this year in 23. I'm going to have more people like yourself on the pod, and I want to talk about stuff like this that like 300 people voted in this pool, and you said you woke up to like 70 messages. Obviously, people care about it, so I want to talk about topics that people want to care about in strongman. So that's why we're not lobbying for it to be changed. There's no
No,
legislation that it's going to change. It's not going to change right now. So I thought it was interesting. I don't want people to think like I'm like, yeah, Mr. 2 hour weigh in, like.
no. Neither am I. That's why it cracked me up when I got some of those fired up messages. I was like, guys, I promise. I don't have number one. I don't have the power to change this, and number two, I promise I'm not trying to change it. I was just genuinely curious what everyone thought. So the poll for me though was very surprising because I thought it would go the other way, where like 60% would say no, 40% would say yes. but instead we ended up with that 51-49. It looked like it looked like a popular vote.
Yeah. If I Man, that's crazy. If I had to guess, like yesterday you texted me like, Josh, I'm putting up this poll. What do you think the results are going to be? I thought it'd be like 90-10.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it shows that this is more polarized than we thought it was.
Yeah.
And
So, yeah,
maybe there needs to be more discussion about it.
I I want people to comment. I want people to reply to the pod and let me know what they think. Um, and just let us know. I think that's one thing that's really cool about you mentioned your buddy who's not super competitive yet, but hopes to be. I think that's the best part about bringing people new into the sport is that you hear all these new opinions. These people that are so green to the sport, and some people have been around for 10 plus years and they're just grumpy and it has to be the way it's always been. And some of these people that have been in for 6 months have so much to add to us and can help us grow. So I'm curious what everyone has to say. So make sure you guys comment, message us, let us know what you think.
Hey, Josh, I have terrible news.
What's that?
We got a bunch of so I posted. I'm about to be on the 580 podcast.
Okay.
What do you want Josh and I to cover? We
Okay.
have a couple of responses.
All right, let's rattle them off real quick. We got time.
Okay. Okay, some of these are goofy. So one of them is holding helium balloons that way and acceptable. So if it's not against the rules, Mike, I say go ahead and do it. Standardized comp weights for weight classes.
Standardized comp weights for I'm not a fan of it.
No, I think it depends a lot on local versus national. It would
And
be interesting. It would be interesting.
This one thing I want to see in an online qualifier in the next year, and I'm surprised I've never seen it, is instead of, okay, say for OSG, it's a 3 rep max deadlift or like a 3 rep max log, like it's always been, and then you weigh yours. What I would like to see is all 80s do a 545 deadlift for reps. All 90s do a 585 deadlift for reps, and then all you do is have to post your reps.
Yeah.
I would love a standardized weight for a specific show for 3 events. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
that'd be that. I think that's a really good idea, especially the qualifiers are getting more and more goofy. Uh, like I think, for example, sorry, I shouldn't say goofy, but they're just getting a little more dependent on the equipment you have. For example, Clash is using a farmer's carry for max distance, or not for 50 feet. So, from my mindset, I have a pair of really, really grippy farmers that have a super high pick. And I'm going to use that for the qualifier because I'm pretty confident I can get like 380 or 390 on those versus a real, pair of farmers that are a little more standard where I can probably only do, 340, 350.
Right, 100%. And yeah, it comes down to equipment. Equipment's goofy everywhere. You're kind of rewarding someone for spending more money on something. And I don't want to make strongman like a rich man's game.
No, like filling sandbags with lead shot, for example. Do we really want to, because I don't have money to fill a sandbag with lead shot.
Right, 100%. What are some of the other questions you got?
Okay, so CJ Cross says, I can't wait to be a topic. CJ, we have too much to cover with you. We can't get on to that.
He's a 90 guy now.
He's gonna do the Luke Davies show.
Yeah, that looks awesome, by the way. I feel bad because I had CJ on once and I really like CJ. And I had COVID and I was like, I swear we recorded like 10:45 at night. I had like the hardest week of my life and I was just like, I wasn't fully in it like mentally. So I want to really have him back on in 23.
Oh yeah, CJ. So CJ is my deadlift coach.
Yeah.
And so I love CJ. CJ's a great dude.
Yeah,
I like do too. All right, so the last one we got, the idea of height classes instead of weight classes.
It sounds silly because we've never done it, but it's kind of funny when you think about it. Think about how much like it would change everything.
Yeah. I honestly, because the first time I read it, our cognitive bias, right, our cognitive dissonance is telling us that would never work, right? But in reality, it does make a lot of sense because you take away the advantage of being really tall or being really short. You take away kind of those advantages that people have. And Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I actually think that's a very interesting idea.
Yeah, I'm in a favor of the way it is now because I think it all balances out. Like I think weight makes a lot more sense because if you're taller, hey, get your points on loading events, get your points on this. If you're shorter, get your points on stuff where you can it's advantageous to weigh more because you're, a thicker dude. So I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
all balances out.
If you're like me and you're 5'8" and you're 220, just get points in the pressing.
Right,
Get points in the
right.
pressing. You're chubby and short, get points in the pressing. But I agree. I want to make sure though. I want to honor this individual's opinion. I think that's a cool idea. I think it's very
100%.
fascinating. So let me see if anything else came up. Let's see. Okay, so I think we're good.
Okay. I thought it was a great conversation. I don't know how long we ran. I think we went over an hour.
I agree too. Josh, you and I just we end up talking, and then it just keeps going.
It's
And
My dog's ready for me to take her outside. She's a little rambunctious now, but I thought it was a fantastic conversation. I want to have you on a couple times in 23. So anytime you got something controversial to post or something that's getting a lot of feedback, I'm more than happy to have you on, and I hope to have a lot of great people on this year and in the future. So
yeah,
if you
I
guys,
love being on here anytime, Josh. Anytime. I
what
love being on.
real quick before you go, this is the New Year's episode. What are some resolutions in strongman for this year?
My New Year's resolutions. Stop getting sick so much. Although I don't know if that's possible being a third grade teacher. I
I
think I
was
was
gonna
sick like
say, dude,
6
you're a
times.
teacher. That's like,
I'm even sick right now, dude. I'm like, man, I'm just always sick. So get sick less. Be more positive about my own accomplishments and others' accomplishments, and avoid all the silly drama that's going on in the world. Avoid it all. And I encourage all strongman competitors to stay out of it. You are better off.
hey, that's a great set of resolutions. So, man, I appreciate it so much you coming on and I'm really really interested what people say with the 24-hour versus 2-hour weigh-ins. And I also want people, if you have another topic like this that you will think like a hole in strongman or something you want added, something you think should be taken away, just let me know. We'll talk about it on here. So,
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I almost feel like we could have had like a panel,
for
because this
sure.
is so interesting. That being said, you and I did talk for about an hour and 30 minutes, so maybe a panel wouldn't have worked for this one. But yeah, I love being on here, Josh. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everyone be sure to like, share, subscribe, everything. Tell a friend to listen. And thanks again, CJ.
For sure, man. For sure.